Welcome back to the Recovery Rebellion, the podcast where we challenge outdated recovery dogma, expose the flaws in the treatment industry, and fight for a system that actually makes sense. Today's episode is for a very specific audience, the people who don't see the problem with 12-step being the dominant force in recovery culture. Now, I know some of you are thinking, what's the big deal? AA and NA help people. No one's forcing anyone to go, so why are you so critical of it? And if that's you, I want you to stick around because the conversation is not about tearing down 12-step for the sake of it. It's about addressing the fact that recovery culture has been monopolized by a single belief system. And that's a problem, whether you personally see it or not. So let's dive in. One of the biggest misconceptions people have in 12-step about 12-step is that it's just another choice, like therapy or harm reduction, that people who don't like it, they can just go do something else. But here's the reality. 12-step isn't just an option. It's the dominant messaging in nearly every aspect of recovery culture. Most rehabs are built on 12-step principles. Even doctors and therapists and family members push it. And alternative pathways are often seen as less than. So it's not just one option. I mean, even if you go to these recovery clubs and recovery centers that are supposed to be an all-pathway place, still, the dominant voice, the dominant resource is 12-step. So no, it's not just an option. It's a belief system that has been woven into the fabric of recovery culture so deeply that, I mean, there's stuff that people don't even realize is 12-step culture, right? Like they just think they're facts about recovery and don't realize that those ideas actually stem from the big book. And there's even people who don't really realize that there's alternatives. They feel like that is the real way to do recovery because a lot of the alternatives are treated as invalid or less than. So this is why people like myself speak out. It's not because we hate 12-step, but it's because we refuse to let that one approach define recovery for everyone. Now, if you're in the program and it's working for you, you still might be wondering, okay, but what's the harm? Like, in your opinion, those principles and that messaging being, the dominant messaging in the space may not bother you because it works for you. But here's the harm, okay? It's not evidence-based. 12-steps programs are rooted in spirituality, not science. Yet they are often presented as the gold standard for substance use treatment. The disease model of substance use disorder, or I guess we can call it this disease model of addiction, because even though I try not to use the word addiction anymore, nobody's using the disease model of substance use disorder, because I feel like anyone who uses the word substance use disorder knows that we're not following the disease model anymore. But science has evolved beyond recognizing that it's a disease. It recognizes it as it's complex. It's not just a simple, like if you are an addict, all addicts are this way. It's not this lifelong progressive disease, and people can actually heal and move on and get better from it. And the idea that abstinence is the only goal, I mean, that's just not true. We'll have a whole episode on this, but for a lot of people, including myself, 100% abstinence isn't just not the goal, but it's also more dangerous. And like I said, we'll talk about that another day. But why is something with no solid scientific foundation treated as the dominant recovery method? Well, actually, I do know the answer to that, thanks to Marty Mann, and we'll do an episode on that as well. But anyways, I mean, let's get into the powerless narrative, okay? Step 1 of AA states we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. For some people, that's a relief. It removes the guilt from them, like, okay, I'm a sick person, not a bad person, and it helps them surrender and stop using. But for others, especially for those of us with trauma, being told that they are powerless can be extremely damaging. It discourages self-trust. And that was a huge one for me, was when I learned to not trust myself is when everything went downhill. I was literally attending a program that told me that my thinking was broken and that I couldn't trust myself. It was bad for me, very bad. It creates a dependency on the group and just the working of the program instead of actual personal growth, right? Because Even though people will be like, oh, but working the steps helped me grow. Well, for me, it didn't, right? Because anytime that I had an issue that I could have learned some skills and being told to go pray and meditate, and I never actually learned how to move forward, right? And it reinforces the idea that people can't take control of their own healing. And that's simply not true. For many of us, healing came from realizing we weren't powerless, that I have everything inside of me that I need to make a change, right? But if you reject the idea of powerlessness in the program, you're often told that you're in denial or you're not ready to surrender, you're not ready for recovery. It's bullshit. There's also this all or nothing thing that just totally fuels shame, and it fuels more people to pick up again after periods of abstinence. I think that one of the most damaging aspects of 12-step culture is the black and white thinking around recovery. If you relapse, you go all the way back to day one, right? If you return to use, if you have one slip, you are going all the way back to one. Meanwhile, you have not lost everything that you gained during however many days you were not using, right? Using one time doesn't erase everything that you've learned. Unfortunately, in a lot of situations like sober living or such, it can get you kicked out, but there's more to your recovery than putting substances in your body. I think even 12-steppers will agree with that. So why do people have to go back to zero for one slip, right? If you use anything mind-altering, you're not sober, which... fine, okay, I'm not sober, but I can still be in recovery, I can still be healing, I can still be working on myself. Like, who gives a shit about the word sober is what I say. I don't care about being sober, because a lot of people that I know that are sober are not, I wouldn't want anything they have, right? Like, that whole sponsorship thing, find someone who has what you want. A lot of these people are fucking miserable. Like, no, I don't want that. But the whole thing with this all or nothing, black and white thinking is that it fuels something and leads to something called the abstinence violation effect, or a lot of times you might hear it referred to as the fuck-its, right? Where a single slip just leads to people feeling like they've already failed, so they might as well go all out. Or also when you slip, when you believe in the allergy model from the big book, then you believe that you don't have a choice anymore, that you've lost the power of choice once you've put the drug or alcohol in you. So it's dangerous, it's extremely dangerous. Instead of helping people recover, this mindset often pushes people further into shame and isolation and down a spiral. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, all right? But AA works for so many people. Okay. AA does work for a lot of people, but in the grand scheme of things, compared to the amount of people it doesn't work for, it's pretty horrifying. Okay, you can do your own research. Please, I always encourage you to do your own research. Don't take anything that anybody says at face value. Do your own research. Look into things, okay? Because there's a lot of people, especially on social media, who have their own agenda and who count on people not doing their own research. But when you are speaking the truth, you're not afraid for people to do their own research. And please understand, I'm not saying that AA or NA shouldn't exist. And if it works for you, that's great. The issue isn't that it exists. The issue is that it has dominated everything in recovery and has been able to uphold itself as the path, the real path to recovery. It's not about tearing 12-step down. It's about making room for all recovery paths. Because if recovery is truly about saving lives, shouldn't we be open to whatever works, even if that's not how we would do our recovery? So what needs to change, right? Well, for starters, 12-step should be an option and not the default, okay? If someone finds comfort in AA, NA, whatever A, there's HAC, there's all the A's. If anyone finds comfort in 12-step, they should absolutely have access to it. But it should never be the only option presented to people in treatment or just in recovery culture as a whole. It should not be the dominant voice, the dominant force. Another thing, harm reduction needs to be respected, okay? Not everyone needs nor wants complete abstinence. Harm reduction strategies, safe supply, moderation, all of that should be just as valid as total sobriety. And we need more evidence-based treatment, guys. Therapy, trauma-informed care, and mental health support should be at the forefront of recovery, not just meetings and step work that often mess up people's mental health. Let's be honest, okay? We need more evidence-based treatment. And stop shaming people for choosing a different path. Whether someone chooses abstinence, moderation, cannabis, methadone, Suboxone, Vivitrol, Sublocade, whatever they choose, that is valid for them. And it is really none of your fucking business, honestly, okay? Look, if you're in 12-step and it's working for you, that's amazing. Keep doing what's working for you. Truly, I am not here to take that away from you. But if you don't see why people are pushing back against 12-step domination, I need you to really think about this. I mean, if a person in recovery doesn't believe in 12 steps, what other options do they really have, right? If they don't believe in 12-step, are they not still getting the messaging, even if they're not going to meetings? And why is a program from the 1930s still controlling modern substance use disorder treatment? And why are so many people told they have to hit rock bottom before they're allowed to get better, when we strive for early intervention and literally everything else? Okay? Recovery is not one size fits all, and the fact that 12-step culture has convinced people otherwise is why we need a major overhaul. Okay? So if this episode made you think, good. That's the point. Okay, I want to open up the conversation, make people think, and let's stop acting like there's only one way. And most importantly, let's fight for a recovery culture that actually meets people where they're at. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's keep the recovery rebellion going. See you next time.